All right, I'll get started now. Thank you for joining us for this legislative update webinar. Before we get started, I want to give one housekeeping item. While they're presenting, our presenters will not be monitoring the chat. So if you can add your questions to the Q&A box, it should be right at the bottom of your screen. You can just click it and it'll pop up. We will hold questions until the end, but you can type them in and submit them at any time throughout the presentation. And I also just want to thank our Riverkeeper members. They make this work possible. And if you are inspired as you leave this webinar and you're not yet a member, membership starts at $1 and ends at however generous you'd like to be. So please consider supporting our advocacy for clean water and healthy waterways. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy and Natasha.
Thank you so much, Monica. Hi, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here reporting from my home office in Kingston, New York, where I've been diligently working on legislative affairs for Riverkeeper remotely for the past year. And wow, what a whirlwind it has been. My name is Jeremy Cherson. I'm the legislative manager for Riverkeeper, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, my name is Natasha De La Cruz and I'm the Legislative Advocacy Intern for Riverkeeper.
So, jumping right in, what is legislative advocacy and why do we engage in it? Well, at any given time in a state legislature in Congress, there are hundreds of bills that touch public health and environmental and energy issues. And if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so basically, my job is to monitor everything that's going on in the state capitol and keep my eyes on what's happening in DC to ensure that positive legislation for the Hudson, for its communities, gets the support of Riverkeeper, and we can help where we can to move legislation forward. And when legislation could harm the Hudson or its communities, we're there to step in to build coalitions to oppose it and make the views of Riverkeeper known to legislative staff. There are a couple big components of the work that I've been doing and that Natasha joined me in doing this session, one of which is the New York State budget. This is a $200 billion budget. It is within the top 3 largest state budgets in the country. I think it's number 2 next to California, which means there's a lot of spending when you start going down the budget line items that touch all aspects of Riverkeeper's work. And so I start working on that in August, working with the governor's office in discussions with legislative offices, but it really ramps up when state session comes back into play in January. And between January and March 31st at midnight, which is the due date for the New York State budget, there is a flurry of activity happening in negotiations for the state budget. And so I'm there to ensure that Riverkeeper's priorities are represented and that bad legislation doesn't get slipped into an omnibus bill. The second thing that I spend a lot of time working on is standalone legislation within the legislative session. These are bills that are not compressed into the large budget bill. They are considered individually in committee, whether it's the Environment Committee, the Energy Committee, the Health Committee, Rules, Ways and Means. There's all kinds of names for these committees, and it's rather Byzantine to work through it. But we spend a lot of time trying to figure out the path of legislation, who the key players are, and how to move legislation we support forward to ultimately getting a signature from the governor and getting signed. Or if we deem legislation harmful and we oppose it, we do everything we can to try and slow it down, gum up the works, stop the bill, or ultimately, if it makes it through the legislative process, secure a veto from the governor. And then third, and probably most importantly, the relationships I spend time building, whether it's with legislative staff, the members of the legislature themselves, or partner organizations, is foundational for moving legislation we support forward or stopping legislation we oppose, because we can't do it alone. And having these relationships built on trust, on the fact that they know that Riverkeeper, Jeremy, Cherson, Natasha, whoever it is, will provide them with truthful, accurate, scientific, and timely information is absolutely critical to getting things done. And so I mentioned the importance of the New York State budget. You'll see here some of the three biggest ticket items from this past budget that were passed. And among the most exciting items that Natasha and I were able to work on was securing the passage of the $3 billion Environmental Bond Act, which will appear on, if you live in New York, on your general election ballot in 2022, November. And what this will do, and I'll go into it further, it would allow 10 years of spending on key environmental priorities that Riverkeeper has worked on. It was in last year's budget, but due to the COVID crisis, it was yanked from the 2020 budget, from the 2020 ballot last minute. And so we've secured it for next year's ballot, and there's no language allowing it to be taken off. So it is there, it will be voted on, it will be reaching out for the campaign. The next big ticket item is the $300 million environmental protection fund, which does a whole lot of good stuff in the state. And then, of course, one of the biggest achievements that Riverkeeper has worked on over the years is providing $500 million of wastewater and drinking water infrastructure investments around the state. Natasha?
Yeah, so I will briefly cover some of the legislation that we've been focusing on during this session. The first on this list being the Emerging Contaminants Testing List, and as the name suggests, this bill would create a list of chemicals that harm human health and drinking water resources. As of now, this bill has passed in both houses, so in both the Assembly and the Senate, which is wonderful news. Next, we have the single-use plastic hotel bottle ban. This bill is aimed at reducing plastic pollution from the hospitality industry. And as of now, it's passed in the Senate and it's looking like it will in the Assembly. Next is the Clean Futures Act. This bill would ban the creation of fossil fuel plants across New York. And as of right now, it is in committee for both the Assembly and the Senate. So we will talk a little bit more about how you can take action in that. Next, we see the Expanded Wetlands Protection Act. This bill would allow the state to further protect freshwater wetlands. And as of now, it is on the Senate floor and in committee in the Assembly. And last but not least, the coal tar pavement sealant ban. So this bill focuses on banning the sale and use of these products. And as of yesterday, it has been passed in both the Assembly and the Senate, which is really exciting news. And I will pass the mic back to Jeremy.
A couple other pieces of legislation we are working on is the Birds and Bees Protection Act. And this legislation deals with a incredibly toxic pesticide known as a neonicotinoid. And if any of you have read anything about bee colony collapse disorder, as in buzz bee, this is the pesticide that is the culprit in causing bee collapse. And in New York, it is used from everything from corn to soy to apples. It is applied directly to the seed where it reaches groundwater. It is sprayed from the air. It is what is known as an ecocide. So it is beyond a pesticide. It kills almost everything it touches. We are struggling to get it passed. We are facing a lot of opposition from large agribusiness, particularly corn producers. And so this is going to be an ongoing effort to get it passed. Another one is the East of Hudson, New York City Watershed Road Salt Task Force. Road salt is pervasive across New York in the winter for making our roads safe so we can drive safely in the winter, but it has a hidden cost. It seeps into waterways, increasing chloride loads in our waterways, affecting wildlife, and eventually it will affect drinking water supplies. So we're trying to get a handle on this, and there are ways that municipalities and the state can reduce their use of salt while also maintaining high levels of road safety. And so this bill would help figure out ways to do that in the east of Hudson, New York City water supply in Westchester and Putnam in Dutchess County. The New York Class C stream protection legislation, this bill passed last year, both houses, but unfortunately was vetoed by the governor. It would protect 41,000 miles of streams that are currently not under New York's regulatory protection program. It was vetoed because the governor and his staff feel that DEC did not have the staff capacity to implement the legislation. Another is environmental justice and public participation in the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Every time a project is proposed, if it is deemed a major project, it has to go through a state environmental quality review. This law is decades old, and these two bills that have already passed the Senate would update the law to give more consideration to environmental justice communities that bear a disproportionate burden of pollution. And then lastly, both houses of the legislature passed a ban on the use of fracking waste from Pennsylvania and neighboring states used on New York roads as a de-icer in the winter. This practice has been going on for far too long, and it is now up to the governor to sign the bill. And just tonight, we'll mostly be focusing on state legislation, but I just wanted to share with you something I'm extremely excited and proud about for Riverkeeper's work. For sea level rise and storm surge, there's been a huge project study that is currently being paused from the Army Corps that will study storm surge in New York Harbor. And some of you may remember, if you followed Riverkeeper, that the Army Corps proposed massive gates to go across the Verrazano Narrows and the outer harbor in the metro area. That was paused, and while it was paused, we worked with Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, Nydia Velasquez, and New York's two senators, Schumer and Gillibrand, to get changes to the study in the Water Resources Development Act of 2020, which was signed into law and required more community consultation and development of the study, and also more consideration of nature-based solutions, so the Army Corps doesn't turn to built solutions as the first solution. So incredibly proud of me and my colleagues' work on that bill, and wanted to share that with everyone. Quickly, the Bond Act, as I mentioned earlier, is so exciting. Many of you, I'm sure, have been following Riverkeeper's campaign to remove dams and barriers along the Hudson River that prevent fish and other wildlife from making it up to their ancestral spawning grounds. And one of the biggest challenges we face in removing dams is a lack of funding. There just isn't money, and it costs millions of dollars to take down even small dams. And so what the Bond Act will help do is money is set aside for restoring stream and habitat connectivity. And this includes dam removals, but also culvert right sizing. Every time you cross a bridge or you drive over a stream and there's a culvert that goes under, many times that culvert is either too high for fish to pass or amphibians to be able to make it from the lower part to the higher parts of the stream, and there's no money to fix that. If approved in 2022, there will be millions of dollars available for restoring habitat in the Hudson Valley. There will also be millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for fighting climate change, for open space land conservation, which includes protecting drinking water sources, and flood reduction projects, which includes restoring floodplains, which of course help protect water quality. So more on the Bond Act in future discussions. New York has the largest need for water infrastructure in the state, which is why we have fought so hard since 2016 to continue securing $500 million a year for wastewater and drinking water initiatives. And one of the things that advocates try to do with environmental funding, and really this applies to any type of funding, whether it's healthcare or criminal justice, is we try to annualize that funding. So the first time you could go to the legislature, the governor, get a one-shot investment in whatever you are advocating for, in this case, wastewater and drinking infrastructure. But it's a whole lot better if you can make that the norm. And that's what advocates, Riverkeeper and our partners have been able to do. We've been able to convince the legislature and the governor that it is in their best political interest to spend $500 million a year on water infrastructure. This is more than any other state in the nation. No state spends as much money as New York in the past few years on fixing our infrastructure. And this, and what this all leads to is municipalities who are cash strapped all of a sudden have the ability to fix their wastewater treatment plant that in a rainstorm was dumping thousands of gallons of sewage into the Hudson or the Hudson's tributaries. And now that they have the money, they're able to expand their capacity and reduce that load into the Hudson, thereby furthering the Hudson's progress towards becoming a cleaner river for everyone. And then the $300 million Environmental Protection Fund supports many great programs around the state: open space, recycling, climate mitigation, and of course, Riverkeeper's closest partner at the DEC is the Hudson River Estuary Program, and they receive money from the EPF every single year. They provide baseline scientific information for advocates. They are the glue that holds all the civic organizations that work on the environment in the Hudson Valley together. And we are just so grateful that they are our partner and that we're able to help support their funding every single year. And I'm going to turn it over to Natasha to talk about New York's freshwater wetlands.
Thank you, Jeremy. So New York wetlands across the state are increasingly under threat from the development industry. We are seeing this especially in the Hudson Valley and Albany, and even in the Finger Lakes region across the state. And this is especially important now more than ever as communities across the state are becoming more and more impacted by climate change. This is because freshwater wetlands help protect communities' drinking water resources, mitigate flooding, filter surface water pollutants, and provide critical habitat for threatened and endangered species. Unfortunately, the current law only protects wetlands that are 12.4 acres and larger, and that are on a map provided by the Department of Environmental Conservation. The unfortunate part of this legislation is that a lot of these wetlands are not included on a map, and so therefore they are not being protected by the state. The DEC commissioner has said that there are as many as 1 million acres of these large wetlands that are not being protected simply because they're not on a map. And for the ones that are on a map, some of these maps are 20 years or even older, and so they need to be updated. Because of this, Senator Harkin introduced S5116, and this bill would help remove that mapping requirement, which would automatically allow the 12.4 acres and larger wetlands to be protected automatically, even if they aren't currently on a map. And this bill would also allow DEC to handle wetlands violations, which currently they are unable to do so effectively. And because of this, this has become Riverkeeper's #1 priority as of now. We really want to help protect these wetlands, not only for the benefits that they provide our communities, but for the environment as well. And so I will pass the mic back to Jeremy.
Thank you. Another bill we would like to see completed by the end of session, which is next Thursday, are two bills that passed the New York State Senate, but are pending passage in the Assembly. Oftentimes, environmental justice communities, low-income minority communities, are left out of decision-making about projects that will impact them. This is because the law the State Environmental Quality Review Act, is decades old and has not been updated to reflect society's changing emphasis on uplifting environmental justice communities. And so what A2103A and A6530 would do is one bill would require that a proponent of a project explain the burden that their project would have on an environmental justice community if there is an environmental justice community within the vicinity of the project proposal. And if it is found that there is a disproportionate burden on that community, then the project has to be denied. And a whole burden report would have to be developed by the DEC to justify that decision. The other bill creates an enhanced public participation plan to ensure that when projects are proposed in environmental justice communities, the proponent offers extensive opportunities for the community to engage in the development and the review of the project, whether that means holding stakeholder meetings in the community with translators or having information available in multiple languages at places around the community, such as the library, schools, etc. As of now, it's very easy for a project proponent to get by without truly meaningfully addressing environmental justice communities. Natasha?
Yeah, so I am sure I'm not the first, nor will I be the last person that you hear speak against fossil fuels. We know the detriments they have on public health as well as the environment. And for those reasons alone, Riverkeeper supports the passage of S5939A. This bill would ban the creation of new fossil fuel-based plants and thus allow New York to get closer to its goal of reaching a carbon-free standard by 2040. And not only that, but we really encourage this bill to be passed to further support the industry for renewable energy resources, because the future is green energy. And unfortunately, this bill is currently stuck in committee, so we urge you to reach out to your senator and assembly member. We are going to be sending out emails soon, so that way it will be easier for you to contact your legislator, because we really want this bill to be passed. And for our legislators to know that the days of the fossil fuel industry are over. Now, on a much lighter note, I have some really incredible news about this coal tar sealant ban. As of last night, this bill has been passed in both the Assembly and the Senate, which is really exciting news for Riverkeeper, because this organization has been advocating for this bill to be passed for almost 10 years. And so the fact that it is finally passed in both chambers is truly amazing. So thank you for those who have followed in the action alert that we sent out. We really appreciate your help through this process, because these products are so harmful for not only us, but also our aquatic ecosystems. So coal tar sealant products are used to seal driveways and parking lots, but are incredibly toxic to aquatic life and human health. This is because these products release a carcinogenic compound known as a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. And no, I'm not going to ask you to say that 5 times fast because it's a mouthful. And so the problem with these carcinogenic compounds is whenever it rains, if someone had used this on the driveway or a parking lot, the storm water enters a waterway such as a lake, a river, a stream. And this is incredibly harmful for the fish and larvae that are in that waterway, and even other local wildlife as well. And this also has detrimental impacts for humans, because if you are walking on one of these driveways or parking lots and you walk around in your home with your shoes on, you are spreading all those carcinogenic compounds all over your floor without even knowing it. And this is especially harmful if you have young children and pets, as they can absorb these harmful compounds in their skin. And so it's just really a nasty product that we quite frankly don't even need to be using, as there are other alternatives on the market, such as an asphalt-based sealant that does not produce PAHs, or the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. So we are so thrilled again that this bill has been passed in both chambers. And so the next step for this bill is to be signed by the governor. And so you will soon see an action alert from us telling you how to contact the governor. And so this legislation can be passed because these products are harmful for not only us, but the environment. And so we really need your help with that.
Thanks, Natasha. It really is exciting. Another bill, so many of you have been following the saga, the unfortunate and sad saga in Newburgh, where Stewart Air Force Base released PFAS chemicals into their water supply. Unfortunately, this is not the only case of PFAS contamination being found within the state. Rockland County now has PFAS and PFAS and other polyfluorinated chemicals in their water supply, as does Hoosick Falls, and as do some communities now on Long Island. 5 years ago, when the Hoosick Falls story broke in Newburgh, the governor ended up tasking the Department of Health with putting together a emerging contaminants list. So a list of chemicals that the department would require water utilities, whether public or private, to test for and notify their customers if they were found. 5 years on, the Department of Health still has not released that list. And so advocates, with the help of New York State Assembly Chair Dick Gottfried, as well as Senator James Skoufis, passed a bill in both houses that would create that list, require it to require the DOH to implement it immediately, and not even that, go beyond the order from 5 years ago and require DOH to revise that list of chemicals every 3 years. And so that bill has passed both chambers, although an amended version passed in the Assembly. And so we are awaiting repassage in the Senate next week. Although that is a formality, there's still a little bit of sweating that goes along waiting for the bill to be repassed, but we are confident it will make its way to the governor's desk. And another great bill that furthers Riverkeeper's work to stopping single-use plastic pollution was a bill that brought together advocates and the hospitality industry that phases out the single-use hotel bottles. And that bill has passed both houses of the legislature and awaits the governor's signature. You will see information from us on how to contact the governor to urge him to sign that bill. This will stop millions of little plastic bottles from making its way into landfills or waterways across New York. And so we will continue to fight for Riverkeeper's priorities and continue to engage all of you in the ways that you can help us push forward that advocacy. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to share with you some of the work that we've been doing this legislative session, and I look forward to taking your questions. All right. What can be used instead of salt? Thanks for the question, Ronan. So it's not necessarily a question about what alternatives can be used to salt, although some have experimented with using concentrated beet juice, which isn't necessarily I don't know if there are enough beets available to spread, but what they end up doing to reduce road salt is, as of now, many local departments, highway departments, don't have the funding to be able to afford GIS, geographical information systems, that allow them to target the right amount of salt for the right amount of place. And so this would allow them to use less salt. So salt isn't necessarily a problem if it's used in lower quantities. It's about getting the necessary technology to local cash-strapped highway departments to be able to reduce their use of salt through better application. There are types of plowing equipment, such as a live edge plow, which is a recent development. And actually the state of, it's either Wyoming or Montana, I believe it's Montana, that's on the leading edge of these live edge plows that get down lower on the asphalt. So when they do remove snow and ice, they remove more of it. So when the salt truck comes, they use less salt on it. So I hope that answers your question. The Carey Institute for Ecosystem Studies, which is right here in the Hudson Valley in Dutchess County, is the leading expert in the region on road salt, and they have a wealth of information on their website about this. Natalie asks, is Senator Harkin's legislation the one that reclassifies Class C bodies of waters as streams? So that is Senator Harkin's legislation, although it does not reclassify Class C bodies as streams. They are already classified as streams. The issue is that Class C streams do not require a permit in order to develop the bank. So the Protection of Waters program that the DEC implements is there to prevent developers or any development project from eroding the stream bank or the stream bed. And so classes A, AA, B, and all streams that are known to support trout or trout spawning require a permit to do something such as, let's say, a golf course wants to redesign the stream course. If a golf course has a Class C stream that doesn't support trout running through its property, they could do almost whatever they want to that stream. And so this bill is really important to try and get done. Unfortunately, the level of opposition that is within the governor's office to this legislation makes it incredibly hard to pass again this session. So we kind of have to go back to the drawing board and see if we can come up with similar legislation that would be more palatable to the Department of Environmental Conservation so we could get some level of protection for these streams. And Timon asks, what tools are available to persuade legislators to vote how we like beyond moral suasion? That's a really good question. Well, probably the most effective tool that can be used is your cell phone and your voice. Making a phone call is probably worth 100 emails. The legislators' offices get very few phone calls from constituents. And so when they do get phone calls from constituents, those are taken right to the assembly member and senator. And beyond that, now that so much has moved to Zoom and remote lobbying, it is entirely feasible for you to reach out to your assembly member and senator or their staff and request a meeting over Zoom or the phone and communicate live directly to them your priorities. And that actually goes a long way. I mean, you can go from a senator or an assembly person not sponsoring a bill to being a co-sponsor within 30 minutes. It's very fast, and sometimes all it takes to move something forward is just asking. Ronan asks, would you say more salt is used in the downstate or upstate New York? I'm very sorry, but I don't know the answer to that question. If I had to speculate, I would say upstate, just because the sheer volume of snow and ice that occurs upstate is probably more than in the downstate area. And Natalie asked, does the Clean Futures Act have any chance of getting out of committee? There are not a significant number of sponsors either in the Senate or the Assembly. Yeah, this is unfortunate. I do not see a path for the Clean Futures Act to make it to the governor's desk by Thursday of next week. And this is unfortunate. This bill has garnered strong opposition from the business community, from utilities, from the fossil fuel industry, the natural gas, the fracking industry in particular is running a sophisticated campaign, not only in New York, but across the nation to convince everyone that fossil fuel and gas in particular is necessary to maintain the quality of life that many Americans enjoy. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. But they have successfully found people in the legislature that have prevented that legislation from moving forward, which is why it is all the more important that when session ends, you advocate to your assembly members and senators over this period from June to now next January that they become sponsors of the bill, because the session continues. The sessions do not end. They do not have to start co-sponsorships from scratch Thursday onward. We can work all summer long, all fall long to get members lined up to support that legislation. And that is so important. They need to hear from you. And let me check the chat. I do not see any more questions. If anyone has any more questions, I'm happy to take them.
Oh, I see a question on my end. Timo asks, have you been involved with Indian Point? Which I think, Jeremy, you can answer that for sure.
I have had a second fiddle role in regards to Indian Point, where there are policies in the legislature that I can support the team's work on, I'm there to do so. But we have a great team of dedicated experts who work on Indian Point.
And Jeremy, how can folks get in touch with you if they have further questions later down the line?
People can get in touch with me, and I'm sorry I didn't put my email here. I can type it out. People can reach me on my email address, jcherson@riverkeeper.org. I'm also incredibly active on Twitter. Twitter, I did not mention, is also a great place to influence your legislators. They are very active there, and they do respond to inquiries on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is Jeremy Cherson1. And I hope you will follow me. And so unless there are any other questions, I thank everyone for joining. And if you would like to see a full slate of our legislation we're following this session and to track things as they're happening, you can visit this link, riverkeeper.org/campaigns/policy solutions. And you can read all of our policy memos. You get direct links to the legislation. You can read all about it. We update this page every single week and try to make it as easy to use and follow as possible. So I hope you will give it a look. And please look out for future emails from me urging you to take action after the session ends to get Governor Cuomo to sign a whole slate of great environmental legislation. And of course, Monica would be mad at me if I did not ask you to become a member of Riverkeeper. We rely on your support and your membership. So thank you so much.
And you can join just on our website, or you can go to riverkeeper.org/donate to become a member. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we'll send out the recording in the next couple days as well. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.